Welcome back to the Occult Rejects. Tonight, we're getting into one of the strangest and most uncomfortable territories in religious history. The place where the Bible, magic, Christian mysticism, angelic powers, Kabbalah, and grimoires all start bleeding into each other. Because the story most people inherit is too clean. We are usually told that Christianity stood on one side and magic stood on the other. Church over here, sorcery over there, prayer over here, spell work over there, miracle over here, forbidden art over there. But history is rarely that clean, and the deeper you look, the more complicated it gets. Christianity condemns magic, but Christian history is filled with ritual power. Exorcism, relics, holy water, sacred oil, blessings, and psalms used for protection. Saints called upon for help, angels invoked by name, demons commanded in the name of God. Bodies, houses, fields, weapons, animals, and graves blessed or protected through sacred words and sacred objects. And then, sitting in the middle of all of this, we have grimoires, books that many people imagine as anti-Christian or satanic, but which are often packed with prayers, fasting, confession, divine names, biblical authority, angelic hierarchies, and appeals to the God of Abraham. So where is the line? When does prayer become magic? When does a blessing become a charm? When does angelic devotion become angelic conjuration? When does mysticism become ritual technology? And who gets to decide whether something is holy, heretical, or forbidden? Well, my guest tonight is Dr. Justin Sledge. Justin, the creator of ESOTERICA, one of the most important and biggest academic projects dealing with Western esotericism, magic, mysticism, Kabbalah, alchemy, Hermetic philosophy, grimoires, Gnosticism, and the stranger edges of religious history. What makes his work so valuable is that he takes the material seriously without turning it into fantasy. He does not need to flatten the occult into superstition, and he does not need to dress every historical fragment up as some grand hidden conspiracy. He brings scholarship into the strange places and lets the evidence speak. And that is exactly why we all wanted him here. But before we introduce the guest, let me introduce the rest of the rejects. Judith, what is going on? Thank you so much. I'm so happy you made it tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy. This sounds like an interesting conversation. And everyone, you can find me at the Weekly Brunch as Zaloon on YouTube, Spreaker, and X.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we got my man, Jin. What is going on, Jin? How are you? Thank you so much for making it tonight.
Thank you, boss, Mr. 93. Shout that out. Of course, I'm really excited to be here because this is kind of a big deal. So thank you so much to Justin Sledge for, and Nick, obviously, for inviting me and everyone on the panel. If you want to check me out, you can at Threshold Saints. That's everywhere. Substack, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, everything. So you can just look up Threshold Saints. I just dropped an episode with American writer, novelist, and poet Brad Kelly and for his new book Earth and Dark, which is about the tunnels of Set. So hopefully, I'm really excited to speak with. I'm going to call him Dr. Sledge, but I know he said that we didn't have to, but it's kind of cool, right? But anyways, so I'm also I'd say a student of the Kabbalah, and I loved your episode on the Kabbalah of contemplation and like Ramik's fondness for the number 13. I'm very fascinated by that, of course, from Tomer Deborah. So I'm a little nervous, but thank you guys, appreciate it, and I think this will be really awesome.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for making it, Jen. I appreciate you. And we got Kaiva Rose with us. What is going on, Kaiva? How are you?
Hello, it's wonderful to be here. It's nice to meet you, Justin. I've watched your videos as well, and so I appreciate you being here. You can find me at Kaiva Rose on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I post daily and weekly astrology videos. And you can also find me at 11kaivarose33.com if you're looking to book a session. So thank you all. I look forward to chatting with you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And we got Zeralath. What is going on, sir?
Hey guys, how's it going? It is Zeralath Eternal, channel of the same name, my channel. I am a pagan, a bit of a mystic, and a magus. I study the esoteric, the occult, analysis of conspiracies, and exploring what it is to heighten oneself in consciousness, and also to help shape the world into something that's better for everyone.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate you making it. And my man, Ethan Indigo, how are you?
Well, peace, everybody. I'm a big fan of Justin's, as I am of every one of the rejects here. So appreciate everybody. Ethan Indigo Smith on all the usual social media. I should be easy to find. And Geometry of Energy is a website of mine. And again, appreciate everybody.
I appreciate you, sir. And lastly, Eros. We got all three of the reject women here tonight. That is amazing. Thank you for making that happen, ladies. Got all of you here. Eros, please let everybody know what's up with you.
Yeah, the big show tonight. Thanks for coming, Justin. Excited for this one. I have a YouTube channel, Eros Up. I post a lot of meta discussions around like the Western tradition and Young and a lot of like Hellenism. I'm a Hellenistic astrologer, stuff like that. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. And don't forget about your Platonism and all the Enneads you've covered too as well. So if you're into that stuff, go check out our work, please. Thank you all very much for making it tonight. And finally, only 6 minutes in, Justin, let everybody know what's up with you and where if they don't know who you are by now, please let them know where they can find all your amazing work.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me on. My name is Justin. I'm an academic. I study Western esotericism in a pretty broad way. These days I'm kind of knee deep in the world of Middle Platonism, which is a weird world to be knee deep in. But you can find me basically on YouTube. I don't really have social media because it terrifies me. I'd rather deal with demons than deal with social media. So I'm basically just there, aside from my antiquarian book business, which we have an Instagram for that. But basically, I'm just on YouTube at ESOTERICA. So I'm really glad to be here and really looking forward to the conversation. And it's always great to be in a great diverse crowd. I mean, it's really great to see such diverse folks interested in esotericism and the occult, and that makes me really happy because so often it's just people who look a lot like me in academic circles, and so I'm really happy to see like real diversity. So it's really cool. That's to me that's just like one of the most important things about these conversations is getting as many different voices as we can in the room: scholars, practitioners, people from different traditions. I think that's just, to me, that's really exciting.
Totally agree. And thank you very much for the compliment. That really means a lot. So I guess kind of like, well, just first off, to let people know, as far as I know, you're not a practitioner. You're just an academic.
Just an academic, civilian.
Okay. Yes, civilian. Never heard it that way. So just for the listeners, then I guess wouldn't be like, when did you decide to start casting circles? What was it that got you into, I guess, even going down this lane of studies?
I guess as a kid, I grew up like watching a lot of like horror movies that often have like, Necronomicons and books like that in them, so I grew up on a lot of that kind of stuff. But also I grew up on like, my parents would drop me off at the library and I would spend my time in the 000s where all the books on ghosts and astrology and magic and stuff were. And I grew up in the American South, which is a pretty haunted area, right? Just in terms of, it's an area really rich and, everything from root work and hoodoo to, everything's haunted and the Civil War happened. So it's just sort of in the air in the American South, and maybe a way that it's maybe not as thick other places. And I grew up on shows like Unsolved Mysteries and In Search Of and these kind of shows. And I think that when you grow up on that kind of stuff, there's either kind of two ways you can go about it. Either you kind of go whole hog into that material and you're like, yeah, the Loch Ness Monster is real and Atlantis made lasers, and you kind of go full tilt conspiracy. Or you become skeptical and you're like, this is not anything. This is just Bigfoot's not real. Loch Ness Monster's not real. Atlantis not real. It's not real. Why should I waste my time studying it? So you become sort of a very Reddit skeptic kind of person. And I kind of did both, right? I maintained my interest in the material and also became critical. And by critical, I don't mean this stuff should be rejected. Obviously, it means that we need to take a critical eye and evidence-based, a data-driven way of approaching it. And so after I finished undergrad, it just, especially with the John Dee stuff, that stuff really grabbed onto me in high school and never let go. And I basically wrote to Wout Hanegraaff, who was the chair of the department at Amsterdam, where this is one of the only degree granting institutions in the world where you can study this stuff. And I was like, look, I just want to go there and spend my entire time working on Inoki and John Dee stuff. I just want to like figure out what in the world was that. And I did that, and I never looked back. I've been working on esotericism in some capacity for, really since I was a teenager. So I guess that's kind of the origin story, I guess. The near origin story is that I couldn't get a job. academia is a nightmare, as I'm sure everyone knows. And when you're an academic in this material, they're basically thinking like you're just like, you want to work at Hogwarts? Is that what you want to do? Jobs are not forthcoming. And my brother was like, look, man, you need to like just open up your shop on YouTube and do your thing. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And lucky enough, it's been pretty successful. And people really, again, a wide range of people, practitioners, academics, people just interested in like world building for their D&D campaign, a lot of novelists, artists, there's a lot of folks interested in this material for a lot of different reasons. And so it's really been an honor for me to serve those communities, and learn to serve them, learn from them how best to serve them. And that's been a really great journey as an educator, because, as an educator, you want to reach as many people as possible. Yeah. And that means learning how to reach people, right? Because I don't speak the language of practitioners. And so when I'm sitting down with Aaron Leach and we're talking about Enochian magic, I can talk about Enochian stuff all day long, but I'm not talking about it from the point of view of someone who's trying to, scribe the ethers. So it's been really, really helpful for me to be able to sit across the table from practitioners and learn from them how best I can approach the material in a way that's the most helpful for them. So it's been a really wonderful experience and a really great opportunity for me to expand my own, pedagogical horizons.
That's great. No, I love it. You're friends with Aaron?
Yeah. We were just at the Enochian Con last year.
That's great. He's got some impressive work. I remember him.
Yeah, and anytime I write anything on, I'm working on an episode on Enochian, even though I feel like I have a pretty strong command of that stuff, I always run it past him, because I want to get a practitioner's eyes on the material, just because I feel like that's a voice that needs to be at the table. And if it's not going to be my voice, then at least it's going to be brought in at some level by vetting the script and things like that.
Oh, that's great. One question I just wanted to ask real quick, just interested, with the John Dee stuff, was there anything in specific that grabbed you with him? I mean, I'm assuming, was it the Enochian work that pulled you in?
It was the language. When I was in high school, I was learning Latin, and I grew up in a pretty Christian environment where, people that we knew, went to churches where people spoke in tongues. So I'd heard people speaking in tongues. And when you hear people speaking in tongues, glossolalia has very specific linguistic features. And when I was looking at Enochian, really, we should stop calling it that, because the texts never call it that. They call it the celestial speech or the Adamical language. The text never calls it Enochian. But at any rate, what I started noticing was that there were grammatical structures and syntax to the Enochian language. And that struck me as interesting, because there's like no faking that. You can't glossolalia that. You can't glossolalia declensions and conjugations. And so learning Latin at the time, that grabbed me, because I was like, this is not random and it's not glossolalia. Something else is happening. And I just cried out for investigation. And, that's just profoundly weird. So it was the language stuff that really grabbed me. And it's like I said, I spent better part of 2 years working in Amsterdam on lots of D stuff, from the Monas Hieroglyphica from 1564 all the way through to when Dee quit talking to angels because he happened to die. I guess he could probably continue to talk to them after he's dead as well, but at least when he was alive. But yeah, the sessions about Bartholomew Hickman and stuff like that.
Eros, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, have you ever had a magical experience?
Say more about what you mean by that.
I guess it's hard to say. People have all sorts of magical experiences. Like maybe they see like an orb, or a god comes to them, or you have like a dream that feels like another entity is in it, or I don't know, even synchronicity could be seen as a magical experience, but I guess just something that felt just kind of magical and larger than maybe normal causality.
Maybe like a paranormal experience would be a good example too.
So I'll speak out of both sides of my mouth, which is the safest thing to do. On the one hand, no, not really. I don't think I've ever seen a ghost, except for maybe when I was a kid, I saw something really strange, and maybe that was a ghost. But also, I don't trust myself, and I've told myself this story enough times that I'm not sure how much of the memory is actually real, how much of it's me reconstructing the memory. And on the other side, I was just at Boleskine House in Scotland for the grand opening of Boleskine House, and this is, folks know, this is Aleister Crowley's old house and Jimmy Page's old house where he began the Abermelin ritual, and there's all kinds of lore attached to this house. But sadly, my dog got really sick when I was in Scotland, and it became clear we were going to put the dog down. And sure enough, the night after the grand opening, I'm sitting in the oratory where Crowley did the Abermelin, and just looking down at Loch Ness, and my dog is like being put down. I'm having to watch this over WhatsApp. It was genuinely heartbreaking. And as soon as they started the process of euthanizing her, the power went out at Boleskine House. And the power didn't go out at the gatehouse, and the power did not go out at the houses across the loch. And as soon as the vet said that she was gone, the lights came back on. And so, what do I make of that? I don't know what to make of it. I'm happy to sit in the not knowing. Does a weird magical house in Scotland has any connection to my poor dog dying in Detroit, or me feeling an enormous amount of heartbreak and anguish at not being able to be there for my wife and kids when this is going on? So does that qualify as supernatural? I think if I were of a slightly different temperament, it might. Right? Sometimes I describe myself as supernaturally tone deaf. In the same way that imagine a person born blind were to stomp their feet and tell you there's no such thing as colors because they've never experienced them. We would find that a bit strange, right? That, like, no, yeah, you have a disability, and it prohibits you to see colors and light. Sometimes I don't want to be that guy stomping his feet and saying there's no such thing as supernatural stuff because I've never experienced them. I just might be the equivalent of having a disability. But trust me, I've been on I get invited to every ghost hunt thing around here, and people are, desperate for me to be the person who's like, it was on my ghost hunt that Sledge saw, an orb or whatever. But then I go there and I'm like, yeah, don't you feel the temperature's colder in here? I'm like, yeah, the window's broken. And I'm always that guy, and I don't want to be that guy. Like, I really, honest to God, don't like that. But no, I don't think I've ever had an experience that gave me pause in my worldview, which I'm a very boring materialist. I have the metaphysics of a 87-year-old Soviet pensionist. Like, that's basically my metaphysics. So
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk more on that actually. I think you had described it once as materialism dialectic according to Marxist structure or something like that.
yeah, it's just like very old-fashioned dialectical materialism, which is to say that history is the result of classes interacting, not the result of gods working themselves out or whatever. But yeah, basically, I've never seen anything or experienced anything that couldn't be explained by the standard model, which is to say, 25 some odd particles and 4 forces. But I'm also very open to the possibility and even the likelihood that I'm wrong. I think that's another important caveat, is that, like I said, if I had to put on if someone gave me 10 grand and said, you had to bet this 10 grand on a roulette game, and the roulette game is your materialist outlook on reality right or wrong, I would bet on it being wrong. Yeah, like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I'm more willing to believe that I'm
Definitely.
wrong, but I can't convince myself in another direction.
I have a quick
So-
follow-up for that. Sorry,
Sure.
guys. I just wanted to know, Justin, how you reconcile faith and sort of religious practice with these ideas that Eros is talking about, like, and when you're approaching this very metaphysical material.
My faith, as much as it is one, is very much wrapped up in Judaism is a religion about doing things. It's about practicing things. It's about, like, keeping kosher. It's about studying. I'm not, sometimes some people say, like, when you pray, which I do pray, they're like, who are you praying to? And I'm like, I don't care. This question is the least interesting question. It's to me, it's a question that has never prompted any curiosity on my part. And it's funny because people say, well, how can you maintain your faith? I'm like, that's what faith is, right? It's I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm like sitting in the place of the discomfort and trusting the tradition. And the tradition is more important than what I believe and don't believe. Sometimes people are like, well, can you be Jewish? And I'm like, well, because my tradition matters to me more than my own personal opinions do.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I read on my channel an old English translation. It's like one of the first English translations of the tractates of the Talmud, right? It doesn't get off into the side books or anything like that. Now, have you just studied the Talmud, or is any part of the Talmud a part of the tradition that you follow? Because I know that there's a widespread, like some people care nothing for it at all, and some people are all about it.
I mean, you mean the Talmud or the Zohar?
Well, I didn't read the Zohar yet, so I'm speaking on the Talmud.
Yeah, the Talmud. Yeah, there's no rabbinical Judaism on the Talmud. The Talmud is just part and parcel. I'm in the Talmud every day. So yeah, it's you know. But again, the Talmud is a record of a conversation, right? It's a conversation between lots of rabbis over several hundred years. So sometimes people say things like, "Well, the Talmud says," and I'm like, "Yeah, like you get enough people in the room, there's always that one like psycho." You know. And what I like about the Talmud is they record the opinions of that one psycho. Yeah. You know, he's like your uncle who just like writes in all caps on Facebook. You know, like we all have that uncle, right? Well, that uncle's voice is in the Talmud because he was there. And so sometimes people quote him out of context as representing the entirety of the text. Yeah.
So you're neither Hillel nor Shammai. You're just a fan of your ancestors.
Well, I would say that the Gemara says, the Talmud says that this world we tend toward the liberal because this world's hard, and so we will follow the rulings of Hillel in this lifetime, but in the world to come, it'll be easier to be righteous, and therefore we will follow the tractates of Shammai. But famously, folks know there was this debate where Hillel and Shammai were shouting each other at the roof of a building, and God breaks through the sky and says, "Elu ve'elu, these and those, both." This is a machlokah l'shem shamayim. This is a disagreement for the sake of heaven. And so part of what I love about Judaism is it's able to hold the idea that within one religion and even within one person, you're going to have deeply contradictory views. And the important thing is to sit in the discomfort of that contradiction and strive toward righteousness, and
it's kind of like how a lot of people just simply almost everybody starts off a liberal, and then when they get older, they kind of end up at least being more conservative, even if they're still liberal, just because of certain baselines that you end up finding. So that's kind of that I wasn't sure was a part of how some in the Jewish world look at the Talmud, which that's really healthy. If you're able to look at it and say like, wow, we used to believe that and used to do that. Whoa, good thing we matured as a people and a religion or something to that effect, right? Because that makes perfect sense to me, because I am far less of the monstrous kind of young man that I was now today in my mid 40s, right? And so certain conservative things make a lot more sense to me, while I sit here and I still crave the mosh pit and the party.
Yeah. And also it sounds like, Justin, you are kind of on the alignment with like the melancholic humor, right? Like melancholy. I mean, that's kind of, not saying like you're melancholy, but I always think I am, because I think that is a sign of intelligence. Oftentimes it's like written in Agrippa, and I think even like Picatrix.
Saturnic.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, are you like a, Saturnian rising sign? Like, are you a Capricorn, or do you just have a strong Saturn in your chart?
I have no idea. I've never seen my birth chart, for one, and it's not really clear when I was born. So I have two birth certificates, and one of them says I was born on February 9th, and one says I was born on February 10th, and it's not clear which one is right. They both have the same time on them. The hours are the time is exactly the same.
What's really funny is the Talmud, like one of the things that's repeated once or twice in the Talmud, even though they're all like, don't do magic, don't do rituals, but go brag to everybody about how good of an astrologer. And I double checked, astronomy or they said astrology.
Yeah,
it's because astrology and are the same.
Well, and the word the word in Aramaic is tagniut, And it's Tagniut is the same. It's just one word for both
Yeah.
in Aramaic.
Exactly.
But,
Because they never used to be separate sciences.
Yeah,
It's called
yeah,
mathematicas.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
all used to be considered like, yeah, exactly, one.
Yeah.
Right.
They never used to be
I have
separate.
to be
Even
sure. I'm reading
medicine
the
wasn't
English-
separate.
I'm reading the English translation. I'm not looking at the Aramaic notes. So
Yeah.
I'm going off of what the English mind that doesn't know Hebrew or Yiddish is meant to know, you know?
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
ask-
and astrology is a very complicated thing in Judaism as well. I mean, there's a condemnation of it that says like don't consult with the Chaldeans, which is almost always a don't consult with the astrologers. But then some of the most famous Jews of all time have been big deal astrologers. So again, this is, and the same would go with magic in the conversation we we're having earlier. The magic is forbidden. Kishuf is forbidden, right? We had to get technical here. Kishuf is forbidden, but then you're allowed to go and make golems. Golems are completely allowed. I have a book of kamayot, of talismans, and sitting right here, written by a very pious Kabbalistic rabbi in 18th century Yemen. So, and again, it all depends on how you define these things about what is allowed and what isn't allowed. This is true of Christianity, it's true of Islam, it's true of Judaism, it's true of anyone. It's just what slips under the door is all about how you define what is sorcery, I guess.
How much of a heretic you are, right?
Yeah, or it's interesting because Judaism doesn't put a lot of emphasis on what you believe. It's not about so much belief. It's like what kind of things are you allowed to do? What kind of things are you disallowed to do? And so, in fact, the word for heretic in Hebrew is a mean. And the word for heresy in Hebrew is minut. It means to split. So it has more to do with like how you relate to the community than it does to what you believe.
Wow.
And so if it's, and this is very different than Christianity, right? The word hareos in Greek, where we get heresy from, it means choice. You're choosing to believe the wrong thing. And so you can see that the flavors of what is constitutive of heresy are very different in these different so-called Abrahamic religions. This is a term that I find to be almost nonsensical because the religions are so very different from each other under the hood. But yeah, I can go to an Orthodox synagogue and say, yeah, I don't believe in God. And they're like, keep kosher? And I'm like, yeah, well, that's all that matters. God will sort himself out or whatever. Like, it doesn't really matter what you believe. Like, you do the thing, right? You're doing the thing, right? And they're like, yeah, I'm doing the thing. Like, yeah, the rest will sort itself out.
That's funny.
Yeah. Speaking of Chaldeans, so I was just reading in the Picatrix. So do you know anything about the city of statues or the house of statues that Hermes created, that everybody was pure of sin? Do you know anything about like the statues and potentially like, is that connected to the Enochian language and why the statues were able to have the power upon the people? I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think they're referring, and again, I don't have the Picatrix, a huge book, but I think they're referring to Haran. Haran is the big Hermetic city in the ancient world that, was a functioning. Say again.
And Atosintin. It's the one with the tower in the middle and the orb on the top, and the orb changes colors every day.
Yeah. I think they're referring to. It's a mythologicalized version of Haran, which was the city that Thabit Makura came from. He wrote the most important book on talismans, but yeah, it was a functioning pagan city. There's a great book called The Last Pagans of Iraq that covers what little we know about them. But they were wiped out by the Mongols, sadly. But yeah, we don't know much about them. But there's one book about them called The Nabatean Agriculture by a guy named Ibn Washia, and that's it. That's all we know. What little we can grab from Thabit ibn Qura. But what's interesting about them is that the Islamic Caliphates never attacked them and forced them to convert. They were protected religious class as a Amal Kitab, a people of the book, and their book were these Hermetic writings. So it's interesting that the Umayyads, Abbasids, protected them. In fact, Baghdad, when it was built, it was built on the astrological timings of a Jewish astrologer. So the foundation stone of Baghdad was set on astrological timings, which shows you, Muslims were totally okay with, at least those Muslims were totally okay with astrology. Not okay with it.
Yeah,
they literally planned around it.
Yeah, because wasn't it Abu Mashar I think it was Abu Mashar, right? Or which astrologer?
I think it is either Abu Mashar or what's the other guy?
His teacher, but and not Benatti, but it's his teacher. I
I think
know.
it's a guy that's name begins with a B, but I can't remember his name.
Yeah, Bisher. Maybe it's Bisher. Saul Ben Bisher. Yeah. Anyways, thanks.
Bashar,
Cool.
if that's like Bashar means commander in like the Syrian language they speak in Syria or Assyria, as I understand it.
Masha Allah. Maybe that's who it is.
Yeah,
Masha
yeah,
Allah.
that's
And then
that's it. Yeah, it's Mashallah who did it. But yeah, Jewish astrologer, basically, set the astrological timing for the foundation of Baghdad.
I wanted to ask Justin if, in being with your kind of critical perception of John Dee and his endemical language, is that what you said he referred it to as?
Adamical. Yeah, the Adamical. Yeah, Adamical, or the celestial speech is the other way that it gets referred to.
Thank you.
I like celestial speech.
That is beautiful. I wonder if you've made any conclusions around it, being critical of it and having explored its grammar, if you will.
In conclusion into what I think it came from.
Well, if you know the validity behind it and so forth and so on,
I can say that there's nothing about it that's exceptional aside from the fact that it's revealed in a series of conjurations. Grammatically and syntactically, it's identical to English. So, for instance, there are no sounds in Enochian that are unusual. There's no voice pharyngeal fricatives, right? Aside from the fact it's written right to left like Hebrew, it's syntactically and grammatically identical to English, with some Latin flair, I guess, thrown in there. So it's not interesting so much as a language. I think what's interesting about it is the mode of transmission, because it was transmitted letter by letter backwards in reverse order, at least at first. And so that's weird. And so the question is if Kelly faked that, there's a real question of how he was able to pull that off. And the short answer is, I don't know. I just don't know. If there are angels, I can't imagine why they would speak that. It's nothing terrible. Like, why would they speak words that have clear etymologies from Greek, Latin, and Hebrew words? It seems like their language would be prior to those languages, right? And on the other hand, do I have a good story to tell about how Kelly was able to do this with Dee observing? I don't have a great story. No one knows what went on in that room, aside from Dee and Kelly and the angels, I guess. So again, it's a question of like, I sit in the uncertainty, and my job is to take the evidence as far as it will go. And then once the evidence runs out, I'm like, I have no idea what happened. Past that, here be dragons.
In in the analysis of dreaming, and I know my dreams where I've had conversations with something in a dream, and I've had dreams with gods in them and archonic forces and allegedly alien. These are my dreams, right? Whatever. And I'm not saying any of it's real, but you're having a conversation, and then if you're having enough self-awareness in the dream, you realize none of your mouths are moving, and it's a little bit echoey. It's like, oh, we're having a psychic conversation, and it's always in a language you understand. So I think that it's a language that the transmissioner, just like anybody who's channeling, would understand. And so it's not that the angel speaks that, but this is how it translates to that mortal, if the entity is real.
Yeah, and then they could have spoken English, I suppose. They were doing pretty good in English to begin with. And also, and this gets in a little into the weeds and maybe in a way that's not terribly interesting, but I did being a language nerd, I ran entropy scans on the two languages. There's the language of the calls, the language of the aethers that we're all familiar with, and there's the language of the Liber Loga, which is also supposed to be parsimonious with them, and they're anthropically not the same. That is to say that they betray mathematical signatures which indicate that they are not the same language. In fact, the Liber Logos language approaches basically a random. It's random. Effectively, it's indistinguishable from a random. Whereas unsurprisingly, the language of the Enochian calls, and it's a relatively small data size, so we have to be careful what we say about it. But it has the same entropy signature as English, or within a couple of decimal, a couple hundredths of a decimal point, which is again unsurprising considering that yeah, structurally it's basically identical. Linguistically, it's basically identical. But
I don't think I knew
again,
that.
this is how in the weeds I got all this stuff. I mean, I was like, doing like hardcore linguistic analysis because again, I think like, if there's a pattern in the Liber Loga text, which are much more extensive, those are much bigger data sets. If there was something in there and we could find it, that would be. I mean, it's two possibilities. One, there could be some kind of supernatural cause, or secondly, we could be looking at cryptography. And we know that John Dee was knee deep in that world. He was a spy for Queen Elizabeth, and he was involved in cryptography. And so it'd be interesting and unsurprising if we were to find signatures in there that indicated what was happening was cryptographic. And we shouldn't forget, right? What is the last phase of the Enochian magic? It's not scrying the ethers. It's not the Liber Loga. The last phase is the parts of the earth phase. And what is that? It's remote viewing to spy on countries. That's the whole point of the whole last phase of the Enochian magic that no one seems to really care about. But I mean, but that if you read the journals, the Watchtower system and the parts of the Earth system are designed to allow D basically to spy on the rest of the world as part of this sort of apocalyptic empire building business he's up to. And unsurprisingly, what is D famous for coining? He coins the term British Empire. So it's just like angelic CIA stuff at the end.
So do you think they were sending messages through the moon? Because I know like full moons were used to send messages. Do you know anything about like, did he use that technique? And maybe that's why it was written backwards. Maybe they had to anything about that at all?
Well, so it's interesting because the parts of the Earth system don't seem to have any a connection to the Enochian stuff, like the language stuff. The language stuff seems specifically to unlock. So there are these Enochian calls, the last of which is meant to unlock this book called the Liber Loga, and that either portends the apocalypse or causes the apocalypse. There's debate among occultists about what is exactly what it happens. But then Dee and Kelly are such wild and crazy guys. I mean, the angels are telling them that the world's about to end and they're about to be central in this, and they're like, "Oh yeah, can we go find buried treasure?" So they're just like completely useless. At any rate, the angels just like moving on, and they just move to this whole other system, which is the parts of the Earth system. So that one doesn't have anything. There's no linguistic communication. It's all remote viewing, or what we would now call remote viewing. But it's also
like
not
the black. Yeah. Also, just say something about the Black Mirror. Oh, sorry.
And also the Black Mirror is a bit of a myth too. There's no evidence that Dee ever had it.
Okay.
It's an 18th century mirror that's basically attributed to Dee by a later person. We know that Dee never talked about using a black mirror. In fact, we know the exact we know the crystals that he used because they survive, and he describes them. He actually draws pictures of them in the diaries. So the famous black mirror is almost certainly not actually owned by Dee himself. They use crystal balls. Although one of the crystal balls was magically what's materialized by an angel, so that's interesting.
Is that this alleged materialized crystal ball? This is one of the saved ones. It's in a museum somewhere.
It's in the British Museum. Yeah, you can go see it. We don't know which one is which. We don't know which one is which, but yeah, they're both there.
Okay,
so,
that's wild.
Let me consult Google. I need to see this. Thank you.
Yeah, they're little too. I mean, we think of crystal balls as like being kind of this big or whatever, but they're actually really small little balls. They're just about like, the size of a tangerine or something. But yeah, I mean, this is how Dee or Kelly, did the scrying. Dee did try to do it, and he also tried to force his child to do it when Kelly quit. One of the many times that Kelly quit, and he stormed off and in a puff, and he's like, Arthur Dee, you do it. And then Arthur's like, I don't see anything, just like weird squiggles and stuff. So, which is really not a cool thing to do if you're a dad, is to voluntold your child to go talk to angels. I just don't do that.
I'm wondering, going from like John Dee to Middle Platonism, do you see a big difference in how like angels are thought of or utilized between the two?
Yeah, well, there's not much angels in Middle Platonism. It's just daimones, right? So you're just living in a world of daimones, in which there are good daimones and bad daimones and neutral daimones. it's only with the advent of Christianity that we really get the adoption of these malachim from Hebrew, these angelic beings. And yeah, by the time you get to John Dee's time, angels are there's not only is there one, there's a half a dozen theories about what they are and how they operate and how many there are. You read authorities like Maimonides who will tell you there are exactly 9 of them, and you read other authorities that will tell you there are millions and millions, an infinite number of them. And so by the time of Dee's time, the conception of spiritual creatures is what he would have referred to them as, has enormously changed. It's also worth noting that the angels, I mean, it's really difficult to call them angels, but the entities that G was describing don't match at all what we typically think of as angels. Like, I'll just give one example. One of the more important of these angels is a spiritual creature named Madimi. And Madimi starts off as, I think, a 9-year-old girl or a 7-year-old girl. And by the time the session's in, 7 years later, she's grown into being a sort of late blooming teenager, and she's grown. Like, she's sexually matured, and she's like flirting with them and stuff. It gets really weird. And angels don't get older. They don't grow. They're not gendered, right? And so, the many people ask, like, what in the world are they? What are they talking to? What kind of entities are they in contact with? And of course, they talk to regular normie angels too. Michael and Uriel and Camiel and those normal angels. But then they talk to these other weird angels that, one of them ultimately tempts them or tells them to swap their wives, and like that seems like a weird thing for an angel to want you to do. And yeah, people have said, it sounds a lot more like demons to me. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds like, if I had to roll the dice, which thank God I don't have to, if I were like talking to an angel and she starts flirting with me and I'm like, hold on, what are you 16? I'm hanging the phone up. I'm done with this. This is creepy. The FBI's gonna kick my door in. I'm done with this. So
I have a theory about what that is with the girl growing up. Perhaps I'm a bit of a Jungian psychologist myself, right? So the anima, right? It could be an egregore of the anima, and so with each session, it's feeding maturity into the egregore as it grows into this, right? And it's servicing the shadow as meant to.
Yeah, I mean, Dee thought enough of this entity to name his daughter after one of his daughters after her, Madimi. She died in the Great Plague after the angels promised that she would grow to old age. That didn't happen either.
Right.
But, yeah.
Maybe it's a low key moonchild ritual.
No idea.
Well, Dee did call her the daughter of fortitude, right? So
it's interesting. So that's a debate too, is whether or not so Madimi disappears, right? This is I think late May of 1587 or so. Madimi goes off, and then what returns is this entity called the daughter, that refers to herself as the daughter of fortitude. And there's a question about, is Madimi the daughter of fortitude, or is the daughter of fortitude some other kind of entity? But yeah, I am the daughter of fortitude, ravished in every hour. And if you read that text, if you know your Nag Hammadi library, there are real weird vibes between that and the Thunder Perfect Mind, the speech of the daughter of fortitude and the speech of Thunder Perfect Mind.
Yes, dialectical, discursive.
Yeah,
like a tantra almost.
Yeah, it's great. It's alarming. I mean, it's the kind of thing that, people, folks interested in Jungian stuff are like, they're asking, like, how do you look at those two things and not see them connected? Like, I don't know, man. Like, I admit to you, there's some thing going on here that is interesting. And of course, the Thelemites are link the daughter of fortitude to Babylon, and it gets sort of Babylon vibes out of the daughter of fortitude. So, and that's one of the last sessions. The daughter of fortitude session is, I think, the next to last session, at least with Kelly. And again, we forget that Dee goes back to England and continues to scry with a new scryer named Bartholomew Hickman for like 15 years or something, and indeed destroys all those records. So we it's a survivalship bias. We put a lot of emphasis on the Dee Kelly stuff because that's what survives. But we would have twice the information, twice the data if the sessions with Bartholomew Hickman would have survived. They just didn't, or Dee destroyed them.
Justin, are you familiar with the sort of heterodox she's Jewish, but like part of the Jewish wisdom literature, but she's also probably part of like the more probably more mythologized in the contemporary left-hand path, like Klopothic sort of stuff that you don't really talk about. But there's the Aisha Zenonim. Some people have sort of compared this princess of the Klippas to the daughter of fortitude, as well as there is an idea in the sort of not the non-commodity library, but the broader Gnostic wisdom literature as well, of the Epinoi of Nuria, and sort of this daughter, also a daughter figure. So I find that very interesting and parallel.
I mean, I have to be very careful how I phrase this, but there's no traditional connection between most of what I read about the Klipot in contemporary occult spaces to the actual to the historical Jewish texts. So try to put it diplomatically.
I agree with that for the record. I'm more of a post-Lurianic person myself, but I definitely draw a lot from the Ramak as well.
Yeah, and so for me, the Ramak is my guy, as much as I have a horse in that race. But the Israel Gardi stuff and a lot of the stuff that come out of Carlson and stuff, it's just, so far as I can tell, it's just made up. Like, it made up in the sense that it has no connection to the Zohar and to the actual. I mean, the main text that details the nature of the Klipot in Kabbalah is the Sefer Karnaim, and the Sefer Karnaim has never been translated to my knowledge, and remains an incredibly difficult text. And I don't know, when I see modern people talking about Klipot and not referencing basically the most important encyclopedia on the Klipot, I'm like, what's this? Something weird's happening here. There's some disconnect between the source material and what's being generated. And, they'll talk about 10 Klipot, and the text is really clear. There are 7 Klipot. That's universally agreed upon. The upper 3 Sphirot never become Klipot. It's like, for me, the traditional texts are the texts that I work in. And when I see like weird stuff in the 20th century or the 21st century that I can't find any references to show me there's actual continuity between what they're doing and what was developed traditionally, it's just, I don't know what's the right way of putting it, like a good analogy. It's like if you were reading about Star Wars and all of a sudden I mean, it's not a great, or like, you're reading an X-Men novel, and all of a sudden, like, Kirk shows up with his phaser and shoots Wolverine. You're like, this is interesting, but this is not the same thing. Something strange has happened here. The mythologies don't make any sense anymore. Are you reading a Star Wars novel, and all of a sudden it's not based in the future, but based in like the 20th century, and Spock is now a stockbroker, and you're like, hold on, this has nothing to do with Star Wars or Star Trek rather. So it's the literature doesn't make a lot of sense to me, frankly.
It's like when you write a fan film, or you're doing what the professionals are doing with multiverse IP mashing.
Is that how you feel about Hermetic Kabbalah?
It's the Hermetic Kabbalah, I think, is, again, from a traditional point of view, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because when I read something like Saturn is associated with Binah or something like that, that's often the Hermetic Kabbalah. I'm like, but that can't be the case according to traditional Kabbalah, because like all of the planets exist in Malchut, and Binah is a revealed Sphira, and therefore we don't know anything about it aside from what has been revealed to us. Because you can't rationally know anything about the top 3 of the Sphirot. And so and also in the Zohar, when the Sphirot talked about, they're never in one place, right? Like you could have Binah in the aspect of Gevurah, right? So Binah can be where Gevurah is in the system. The system is dynamic. God is a verb in Kabbalah. God is not and so, but that doesn't work if you want to like nail down all the Sphirot so you can map them onto the I Ching and the Tarot and all that. They need to be stable. They need to be sort of fossilized into very specific kinds of things. So for someone who comes out of the traditional Kabbalistic world, it doesn't make a ton. It doesn't align if you read the Zohar and other texts like the Ramak and Itzhak Luria. Because in Itzhak Luria you have Sefirot nested within Sefirot, at least in the lower 7 Sefirot. So it just like, yeah, like it can't be that I don't know, Netzach is associated to this trump of the tarot, because Netzach is never just Netzach. Netzach is in a relationship of the 10, and it's always under the aspect of, you know, whatever.
Would you say that it's different kind of end goals as well? I mean, it's kind of different worldviews, right? That you're trying to mesh together, and the kind of end goal of those worldviews are kind of different.
Yeah, and I respect what, you know, as a magical tradition, I totally respect what the Golden Dawn was trying to do. I mean, it's a really heroic thing to try to like create a synthesized version of basically all the world's magical and mystical traditions into one system. With the gold, I mean, that's a pretty tough thing to do. And the folks in the Golden Dawn, of which, by the way, many of them were women who still don't get the coverage they deserve. You know, we always still talk about the same three guys, but I mean, there are so many women involved in the Golden Dawn, really doing a lot of that heavy lifting. But yeah, I think it's an amazing accomplishment intellectually and spiritually. But I think if you come from any one of those traditions, if you come from the tradition of the I Ching, or you come from the tradition of the Kabbalah, it's going to be a pretty murky mirror that you're looking at yourself in. And that's not a criticism.
Yeah.
It's just to say that, you know, yeah, it's like when I read traditional Kabbalah, and then when I read what McGregor Mathers had to say about it, I'm like, these are not the same thing. They're not playing the same game. And they're not, you said it's not the same worldview, and they're not up to the same thing. And I think that's fine. I think that's how religions evolve and change. And, you know, tradition is a great thing until it's not. It's a great thing when it informs your life and makes your life more rich, and it gives you a way of reading the world and symbols by which to parse the world. It's not a great thing when it's like peer pressure from dead people. And I think that Mathers and other folks who are, you know, doing Golden Dawn stuff, I think that they said, look, we're going to take these traditions, we're going to make them talk to each other, make them do different stuff, and we're going to build a magical practice and worldview out of it. I think that's a noble and interesting task. Mostly. I think that there are some worrying elements about it, you know, and when Crowley's explicitly robbing things from the Kabbalah, and all the while, you know, being a pretty voracious anti-Semite, I'm like, come on, guy, Crowley, damn it. Like, it's, you know, it's, or like talking down about Indian people, and all the while being like, yeah, we're going to take yoga and show you how to really do it. And I'm like, I don't think this, you know, it's just, it's, yeah. But again, what do you expect out of a bunch of Victorian dudes, you know?
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because that's often my take as well, is like, you kind of have to be on your own journey. Like, I like the idea that Golden Dawn, and I mean, I've never been a part of those groups or studied them really, but I often think like you will naturally get there. Like, you will naturally synthesize your own ideas from all the different systems. And I think that is the most important approach to take, because it's genuinely your own lived experience. Because like you said, otherwise you get this regurgitation of somebody's ideas of what this is connected to and what's that connected to. So it's interesting to hear that, because I've actually never really studied the Kabbalah, just seen how it is connected to the things that I study. And I'm like, maybe I don't really know that. So I appreciate your take on that, because yeah, it's been my issue with certain systems is like, people will get there, let them get there. Choose your route, study your things, put it together yourself, because that's what the path is about, right? It's not supposed to be this TV dinner, right, that you put in the microwave and it's cooked.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is, even within one tradition, you're doing that. It's not like, because I come from one tradition and the Kabbalah is our tradition, it's not like I'm like, that's just, there's like one school. I mean, there's one way of doing it, or one way of understanding it. You know, like I said, I have an admittedly very weird take on how I appreciate the Kabbalah. I think, you know, I've said this publicly, and I, you know, can get in trouble for it in some ways, but like, I don't like the Kabbalah of Isaac Luria. I think it's a disaster. I think it was a disaster. I think we should have stopped at the Kabbalah of the Ramak. I think that's great. I think that the Kabbalah of Isaac Luria, may his merit protect us, led us into dark waters with Shabbatai Tzvi and all kinds of stuff. That's a very controversial opinion on my part. Like, I've read the Riot Act about saying that. But even in one tradition, there's not the one authoritative way of doing things. And even if you are, you're always doing it your own way. You know, you're always doing it. You're always doing it the one way, or your own way.
What are the difference between those two systems, if you could speak on it a little bit?
Just
Those
very
two.
just very briefly. So the system of the Ramak, they're both Kabbalah, right? And most Kabbalists will say that all Kabbalah includes the Kabbalah of the Ramak. The Ramak is Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, blessed memory. So the Ramak system is, in my opinion, the greatest synthesis of the Kabbalah of the Zohar, and it mostly is combining Neoplatonic philosophy with the Zohar, in a way that systematizes it. The Zohar is not a system; it is a bunch of commentaries, and so he systematizes the metaphysics of it. I think he does it in a very elegant way, in a very simple way, but I shouldn't say simple, in a very elegant way. The Kabbalah of Isaac Luria introduces a bunch of elements into the Kabbalah that I think are foreign. I think that I think are his ideas, and they're not native to the actual soil of the Zohar. And they're interesting and they're neat and they're cool to talk about, but I think they're foreign importations, and I think that they ultimately lead to all kinds of dangerous stuff. For instance, I'll give one example of this. So the Isaac Luria puts a lot of emphasis on the fact that the Kabbalah, if practiced correctly, can basically force the Messiah to come. There's a kind of messianic eschatological accelerationism that is at the very heart of Isaac Luria's ideas. In fact, his student was so convinced that if he just stayed up one more hour a night and memorized one more Mishnah, he would become the Messiah. It led to this kind of like fevered desire to bring the Messiah, and that led to this false Messiah emerging. This guy named Shabbatai Tzvi in the 1660s. And this was a complete disaster. Shabbatai Tzvi. Half the world's Jews started to believe that he was the Messiah. Rabbis started believing he was. And, they packed their bags and waited to go to Israel and do all this stuff. And then the guy converted to Islam, and he invented another religion. Right? He made this whole other religion that exists to this day, actually. And so it was a disaster. It was a huge disaster. And so I lay that at the feet of Isaac Luria. And that's not to say that Luria wasn't a genius and a very righteous person. He certainly was. I just think that if I could have convinced Isaac Luria never to come to Safed, I would have stay in Egypt. Don't come to Safed. Let the Ramak win the day. But obviously that did not happen. And to be clear, I'm in the vast minority of people who say this. So this is me outing myself as a kind of very heterodox person with interest in the Kabbalah.
I actually have a redirection sort of, but it's interrelated, we'll say.
Sure.
So you at the beginning you spoke about like the linguistic elements of this Adamic language and how you noticed it was very similar to English in every way. But I wondered if you see a pattern of ritual grammars throughout, we'll just say the Western tradition broadly, that may or may not include Kabbalah, in your opinion, whatever you want to include. But do you see like a ritual grammar that is consistent or perhaps interrelated between the different canons and different sort of regional works?
Yeah, I think that the ritual canon is the Catholic Mass. I mean, basically all Western magic, at least as it emerges in the early modern period or after the Middle Ages, is based in some ways on some element from Catholic liturgy. And I mean, even necromantic conjurations of demons are based on exorcisms, right? They're just sort of a long form version of exorcism, which wasn't patented, so to speak, until the 17th century. So underneath the hood of, I think, most of Western magic, with a little bit of an exception of some Jewish stuff that does make it in via the Solomonic tradition, it's really pretty Catholic. This is the thing that I've always found interesting, because I'm kind of an outsider to both traditions. I'm obviously neither Catholic nor an occultist, but I found that the fact that Catholicism is a lot closer to occultism than Catholicism wants to admit, and occultism is a lot closer to Catholicism than it wants to admit.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
And neither side can come to terms with this. The occultists really don't want to be Christians, and the Christians really don't want to be occultists. And the truth of the matter is, there's about 80% overlap, with the exception of some Arab astral magic from Picatrix and some Jewish Solomonic magic coming in from the East, which makes up maybe that other 20% or so. And again, some survivals of Hermetic stuff, but very little. But yeah, when you look at a book of this is a funny thing. I often will talk to Protestants who've never been to a Catholic church and who've never heard of Catholic Mass, or Catholics even who really didn't pay a lot of attention to what was going on and theatrics of the Mass. They'll read these necromantic manuals and go, wow, this is really creepy and weird and like this technical stuff. And you have to look to the east and do this, and you have to fumigate this thing and do that, and put the sword here and do this. And they're like, wow, that's so weird and occulty. I'm like, it's just Catholicism. Like, I've been to Catholic Masses all the time, and I'm like, they're doing theurgy. Like, this is just theurgy. Like this is what Iamblichus is talking about. And of course, like, who is Iamblichus competing with? He's competing with the Christians, right? And the Christians are developing their own counter theurgy based on what they're doing, and it's a whole meme war about theurgical development. And I'm like, yeah, it's just because you're a Protestant. You go to church and nothing happens. They go to church and they change a cracker into some dude's body. Like, they're doing magic up there. Like, they're doing theurgy, like too cool theurgy. Like they are inducing a miracle in front of you. I live in the neighborhood where the cathedral is, and every time they do Mass, they ring the bells to announce that basically a miracle has happened. And I'm like, you guys just don't see the magic because you're too Protestant to see it. And you don't see it even as a Catholic because it's normal to you, and you're not seeing the fact that what's going on is like 4th century theurgy. So
yeah,
I think
I grew up Catholic.
I did as well.
And I loved it. I loved all the ritual, like the being sprayed with the water from the evergreen. And like, I am so grateful I grew up Catholic. I'm not Catholic now, I'm a Buddhist, but like, I'm so grateful for that ritual because it is very, I loved it for that reason. So it's interesting to see that you put it so closely to occult practitioners. That's fun.
Yeah, I think, again, it's, there's no Western magic tradition without the Catholic Church. It just doesn't exist. If the Catholic Church had never come to Western Europe, there would be a completely unrecognizably different form of whatever. But ritual magic, especially, is, and even some non-ritual magics like hoodoo and voodoo, are unimaginable. They're just not possible without the Catholic Church.
I also, like, I grew up Catholic, and then, like, in my arc of things, I funnily enough went to a evangelical church after that, because like when I was a young kid and before I hit confirmation, I had made a decision I didn't want to be a part of it because I didn't understand things a certain way. I had my own certain feelings and values, and I started noticing, like, I was like, man, why do I got to walk into this place every week and look at this dude who got freaking like all this suffering stuff and have that projected? I'm a little kid. I'm kind of picking up on, like, why do I want to be surrounded by all this? And also the 90s emerged, and the reputation in the media with the church had finally been revealed of some of what they have been doing as an industry with choir boys and such. So that was entering the public consciousness too. And then by the end of the 90s, I'd made a decision that I don't want to be Catholic. There's something very wrong for my soul with it. And then when I had run my course with the evangelical church and I started getting into metaphysics, and I looked into the Eastern stuff before I came back around to paganism, I grew to appreciate rituals and ceremonies more, because I finally had the mindset and the value set to sit down and look at it and understand, get and answer questions, especially when you got these thing, because Catholic is kind of like an occult organization. You get the conspiracy theorists, they throw all this stuff about the Vatican at you. You start realizing, oh yeah, what's all the pine cones about, and the lion over there, and the way the angels posed in this way, making this gesture that looks strangely like a mudra. And then you're, and that can scare the hell out of you if you're amongst the profane, the uninitiated, right? So I got initiated, and it's been the best decision I ever made in my life.
I mean, one of the episodes I made was so prior to the Roman ritual being developed, and like, I forget exactly, 1604. That's probably not right. Be careful with dates. But before exorcism was finalized, I mean, it was common for necromancers to have exorcist manuals because they're the same thing. If a person's possessed and you can take the demon out of them, you can put them to work. Why let a good demon go to waste? It's the same exact logic. It's the same rituals. right? They're not fundamentally different rituals. I mean, there's a reason why necromantic circles from medieval books of magic are full of names of God, and again, the hyssop, being sprayed at them, and them being accosted, and then these various Hebrew names for God. It's like, yeah, this is just like in nomine patris filius. It's the same. It's exact same ritual, just being utilized for a very different end. Which makes total sense to me.
Oh, what do I gotta feed my shamir because I got a house to build?
Yeah, I don't know what shamirs eat actually.
Well, you don't have a pet shamir? I thought they all did. I'm kidding.
I would love to have a shamir. I wouldn't have a lot of use for a shamir, but folks that may know this is there's a story in the Talmud about building the temple, and one of the prohibitions in the Bible of building the temple is that you can't use stone that's been hewn with iron, and it's quite difficult to build a giant temple without hewn stones. And so the story that Gemara ends up coming up with is that a magic worm basically could cut the blocks using their magic worm. This is a bizarre. So it's one of my. I just love the lazy rabbis sitting around being like, so how do they do it? I don't know. What do you think? I don't know. A magic worm? They're like, let's do it. Let's go with that. A magic worm protected by Asmodeus, of all things, the king of the demons, who's remarkably pious, actually.
That's right. It was the ancient aliens theory of its time, right?
Yeah. And people still, by the way, people still think that the shamir is out there. I've heard, that the shamir will reappear in the days of the Messiah.
I'm waiting for dragons to come back. I'm gonna have one.
I was wondering, would you be able to speak on like modern messianism and apocalypticism in Christianity and Judaism?
I don't know if I can say a lot about it because I don't do a lot of study of contemporary stuff. Most of the study that I work in is like more medieval and ancient stuff. But I mean, I think I said this before, is that there's really no such thing as like Christianity or Judaism or Islam. There's just apocalyptic flavors of this stuff. That apocalypticism is actually the religion we all believe in. Everything from like zombie movies to to whatever. It's like it's all apocalyptic at some level. And our politics are wrapped up in it too. I mean, how much do Christian evangelicals give to the state of Israel to do the things that they do in order to basically accelerate Jesus coming back? Because if you dump enough money in Israel, Jesus will come back quicker. This is it's religious hubris at the level I can't even imagine. And of course, the religious Zionists are more than happy to take their money because they think their Messiah is going to come back and whoop those people's ass. So everyone's betting on different horses.
Anti-cosmicism. I think that's what they call it.
Yeah,
you're denying life, basically.
Yeah, it's a bizarre thing. But no, I think that apocalypticism is just baked into religiosity, or Christianity is inherently an apocalyptic religion. I mean, Christians have been believing the world's about to end since Jesus. I mean, Jesus said to his own followers, "Some of us, there are some among you that will not taste death." So that's been there, baked in Judaism too. And I think the most interesting element is in Judaism now. There's this messianic movement that has emerged around the former Rebbe of I guess he's still the Rebbe. I don't know. The leader of Chabad Lubavitch, the Chabad movement, who passed away in the 90s, and there's a very strong faction of them that believe that he is in fact either not dead, or he's occulted, or that something has happened. He's going to come back pretty soon, and he's going to be he's the Messiah. And you can go to Brooklyn, and you'll see posters everywhere that have his picture, and they say Melech Mashiach, the King Messiah, on them. And this is the beginning, I think, of a new religion forming. That there will be within Judaism an offshoot religion that is ultimately emerging around the claim that this the leader of Chabad Lubavitch is in fact the Messiah. And I've studied in those yeshivot, and I've been in that world for a little while, and I've definitely met people who say things like, "No, he's not really dead; he's hidden." It's a very Shia feeling, right? He's the occulted Messiah, or that he's somehow fused with God, and he's kind of like God at this point. And you're like, hold on, you're reinventing the Trinity. So I think that's an interesting thing that's going on now in Judaism. But no, I think that look, messianism has been baked into the Western world even before Christianity. I mean, the Qumran and the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's just baked in. And I think, like I said, there's a reason why we all like to watch zombie movies. Is because that we all have, we like zombie movies not because they're scary. We like zombie movies because we want it to happen. Like that's the deep urge is for the world to end. And we all have that apocalyptic urge. And so we like these like end of the world movies, you know, where the comet hits the earth or zombies kill us all or some outbreak or whatever. It's because we've been, you know, again, I'm not a Jungian, I'm a Lacanian, in that we, you know, Lacan says there's no cure. There's just there's learning to enjoy your symptom. And we have an apocalyptic neurosis. And the way that we enjoy the symptom is we like watching the world end over and over and over again because we can't get it to actually end, unfortunately. And you know, my favorite bumper sticker is one of the ones that sort of looked like President Obama's campaign ad, and it just said "big fucking meteor just ended already." I always like the idea, like, you know, this literally like we are in some sense praying to be wiped out, and that apocalyptic impulse I think is just 2,000 years old. Like we want to see the end, and not only do we want to see it, we are entitled to it. I mean, how many people think literally we are the last generation? It is us. We're the last ones. It's not just that we want it to happen; we are entitled to it, and I find that to be there's a kind of interesting a nihilistic hubris.
There's the religious narrative that runs through like the rhetoric of the mainstream that on a subtextual level you persistently are being gaslit into it being the end times, not the end times for the Christian mindset, thinking about, are we in the tribulation, right? Is the mark coming? And you know, like I sit there as a former, like I got really, once I went to the evangelical side of things, I stumbled across Book of Revelations more consciously. And, you know, eventually I became a conspiracy theorist because that made me a conspiracy theorist. And now I just look at it, say like 99% of the stuff in this book is like the collective of man making horrible decisions and the consequences that logically follow, by and large, was a great deal of it, because it's talking about the dealings of the Antichrist and what those people do. And if you're not religious, they have Extinction Rebellion with all the people that are the carbon emission junkies, right? They want a carbon tax, like this, like it, like, you know, you're just a mouth breather. That'll be 10 cents for inhaling, right? That's the way it is, right? And like all this stuff, like I said, it's the anti-cosmic, right? It's just it's like Gnosticism. I watched a little bit of your Gnosticism series. Excellent. But yeah.
Yeah, it's like in Buddhism, there is like the 12-link chain of causation of life and death. And so getting caught in that chain, the first link in the chain is ignorance. So it's like, you know, getting caught up in that chain of life and death and just rotating through that cycle is part of like breaking out of that, is what Buddhism is, as like a big part of the practice. But also too, like back to the Nabatean agriculture. Now, did Abraham come from that culture, correct? And like, how do you see this like continuation? Because they were star people, right? They were astrologers. They based a lot of their stuff on the land and all that kind of stuff. But then he kind of started to be one of the first sort of prophet figures. So how do you see, like, do you see like a shift in how religion and like, would you say that kind of established the Western take on religion? I mean, obviously it did, but yeah.
It's a huge question. I mean, it's certainly the mythology of Abraham as being sort of a idol smasher, right? And he broke with the Chaldeans and he quit worshiping stars and idols and became a monotheist. I think it's all retrojection. I mean, and we know that the ancient Israelites were polytheists. You know, they weren't monotheism is very late in the history of Israelite religion. I mean, they were polytheists in the sense of they were henotheists. You know, my dad can beat up your dad. It's not that your dad's not real. It's just my dad can beat your dad up. At least in my neighborhood, right? Over here where we live, my dad's in control. So I think that I think that whole Abraham monotheism stuff is a retrojection back into the past to justify theology they had long since adopted. But again, it's a split narrative, right? Because on the one hand, there's this idea that, oh yeah, we quit worshiping stars and we quit dealing with astrology and blah, 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 blah. But that didn't ever happen. Like the astrology was alive and well in Judaism, you know, it's alive and well in Islam, alive and well in Christianity. So it's theologically contested, but with few exceptions, do people just say, nope, this is not real. You know, in fact, none of the it's much later. It's in the 19th century where this is ultimately decided that this is not true. But religiously, they never put the can on it.
I wonder.
I have a quick. Sorry, Ethan. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll be quick. Hopefully, I wonder in regards to this kind of apocalyptic mindset. You did an excellent presentation on Ashera, the goddess consort of Yahweh. I wonder what maybe you might have learned about the short-term implications, historical and philosophical and otherwise, that you might have heard or referenced or inferenced in your studies. And maybe, I think you kind of touched on it, but what might be the long-term implications of this in our cultural and philosophical outlook, if you will?
I think for a tiny amount of people, it'll be of interest, and for the rest of people, they'll ignore it. Yeah, I think that most people don't care. I mean, this is the one thing that all academics and scholars suffer from is the hubris of believing that people care about what they do. At the end of the day, people who really want to believe that, you know, monotheism was always what Israelites did, they're going to look at, and again, also the evidence is really spare. We have like 2 inscriptions, and they're going to look at that and say, yeah, of course the Israelites worshipped other gods. That's what all the prophets told them not to do. Like, this is not new. They were just wrong all along. Yeah, like you found 2 inscriptions about what the prophets talked about 50 times. So I think that for a tiny group of people who want to like go back to the days of worshiping Asherah, whatever, maybe they'll do that. There'll be 50 people out there that for whom that will inform some change in the religious practice. But you know, it would be maddening hubris to think that you know, a YouTube channel is going to make a dent in thousands of years of tradition. And it's not my task anyway. It's not what I'm trying to do. It's just to say, like, look, like this is the data indicates that this was a thing, and for some people they're like, oh yeah, that disproves the Bible, and then another group of people say, oh no, that exactly proves the Bible. That's exactly what the prophets are talking about. So it's hilarious that, you know, depending on the hermeneutic you bring to it, you hear what you want to hear, which is always the case, right? We never read books; we're just reading us.
Just wanted to follow up. It was a little while ago, so I apologize. But you spoke about hoodoo, and it's kind of, well, I don't want to speak for you, Justin, but you posited like a relationship with Catholicism. I don't know if you're familiar with Catherine Ironwood, but she posits a relationship with the sort of 1930s Jewish-owned spiritual and mail order and drugstore magic, like occult supply stores, kind of.
Yeah, the 7th and 8th books of Moses and stuff.
Yes, and how that was sort of an introduction of that kind of like practical Kabbalah, we could say, into this more Afrosyncretic tradition. I don't know if you agree with that or disagree.
Yeah, so I had to plead ignorance here. I just don't know. I don't work much in the 20th century, which is funny because in growing up, hoodoo and voodoo were just like all around me. I was a working class person in Mississippi, so people went to root workers. Like this was a thing that I knew about. You know, knew people that went to root workers. You know, I've lived near New Orleans, so it was a thing that like I experienced firsthand. But as an academic, I'm largely ignorant to the history of it and things like that. So I don't want to speak on something that I don't have especially the religious and spiritual traditions of a minority or an oppressed minority. I don't want to like pretend to speak on it when I don't have any I don't have any learning about it.
I remember a while back when you had dropped that first Yahweh video where you found some of the work that showed him in the pagan reflex. Something trying to remember from all the way back because it was a favorite episode. I remember leaving a comment that I think you had at least put a like to about where I said like something about like, ooh, pagan Yahweh for the win or some silly little hoorah comment, right? Because I love digging back, like, you know, like I love doing things like I want to look into Zoroastrianism and go to I love going pre what's been written down, like where it gets more anthropological and there's not so many books other than books written about what was discovered, right? Have you because I'm not in touch with a whole lot that you've done on that subject since then, how much have you expanded on the pagan roots of your ancestors, and how that has reflected in the in your relationship with you doing the thing?
I guess I would be slow to use the word pagan just because it's a Christian term applied to Romans, and we're talking about Iron Age Canaanites. So it's just it's a term that I'm like, yeah, it's a category that I'm not super comfortable with. But in the sense of like ancient Canaanite polytheism, sure, like that's just, yeah, that's the rule. I think that the major thing that if I could go back and change anything about that episode, I guess, based on more recent readings, is there's been a new book out that argues, I think, well, that in the same way that we pretty clearly see manifestations of Baal in different geographic locations, or that manifestation of Baal is idiosyncratic to that geography. Think about the way the Madonna appears in different places, right? We have the Black Madonna over here and the shrine of this, or Demeter, right? In the ancient world, Demeter appears in different manifestations in different geographical regions. That there's been a recent book out that says that probably Yahweh also appeared manifested in different regions in different forms. And therefore, in the same way that we have Baal Hadad and Baal Zephon, like those are probably different manifestations of something like a unified being, but local regional developments would have meant that they would have thought about them as different gods. And that, so we may even have to think that it's not that Yahweh is a god among gods, is that Yahweh may have been a gods among gods.
Right.
And that would track very well to what we know about Baal. And it would track to very well to what we know about Mediterranean religions more generally. So that's a vector of the conversation that I did not include because I just hadn't read this book hadn't come out yet.
Right.
And so I read that book, and I think I'll probably do a follow-up episode at some point to show that that it's probably the case that we shouldn't think about these gods as individuated beings, but as manifestations or avatars or something. I don't know what the best. I wouldn't want to use the word avatar, but local manifestation meant that they were not numerical identities. We tend to think of gods as numerical identities, right? Like that Aries equals Aries, no matter where Aries appears. That's not the way ancient people thought about them.
Right. Like, because I've always looked at the word Elohim, and then this word just makes more sense if it's just a term for like a pantheon, because the only other answer I get is from Trinitarians that say, well, no, that's because that was the earliest form of the Trinity, and I have a different understanding of the Trinity in my way of seeing it.
Plural Hebrew words get used for singulars all the time. It's just it's not that weird grammatically.
But is Baal always the title for Lord, or is it sometimes actually the name?
I mean, it's both, right? Like sometimes, it's Baal means just Lord. I mean, in Hebrew, it can also mean husband. It can mean owner, like manager. So it just has that valence. But clearly and even Yahweh is sometimes referred to as Baal. So
yeah. And the one thing I say, just because I always believe there's the linguistic connection in some remote way. In the Old Norse, we got Balder, Odin's son, right? And I think that the Baal there has a placement, being that he is a deity. He's not even a demigod. He's definitely a full-blown god who's the son of that chief god of the All-Father. So
he survives Ragnarok too, right?
There could be a lordship implied for Balder. What's that?
And he survives Ragnarok.
He's
reborn after Ragnarok.
Yes, he's slain by the blind god via the tricks of Loki, and then he is set up to be held in Helheim by Hel, herself as a special guest with a whole banquet table, and she's not going to give him up until the entire universe says we miss him, right?
Yeah.
If there is no appreciation from every single atomic, conscious, sentient spirit, God, whatever, in the all of creation, and I can't remember the name of the elite who took Sleipnir, Odin's horse, went and failed because Gratitude, who may have been Loki in disguise, he could not convince Gratitude herself to weep for Balder. And thus he is held up until Ragnarok.
And it's possible that also, like, because we do know that some Semitic gods do go west, right? So Adonai, that god does become Adonis, right?
Mhm.
So that we do get some, that there is some cultural shift. And M.L. West has made probably the most decisive book on this. It's maybe one of the best books ever written in terms of the study of what stuff I do. It's called The Hell Sun Looks East. That shows that Greek stuff is all wrapped up in Canaanite mythology, Greek mythology, Hittite mythology. So that's a fantastic book.
I was going to ask you, Hittite. That's what I was wondering, because the Hittite is the land of 1,000 gods. So I was wondering, I've always wondered, what is the Jewish connection to Hittite? I try to figure this out.
So the Hittites were long extinct by the time that Jews showed up. Yeah. So Hittites, they get destroyed during the Bronze Age collapse. They don't survive the Bronze Age collapse. But they must have made some impression, because there are people in the Hebrew Bible referred to as Hittites. So they had some memory of them, of Hattusa, and they were the Trojans. That's who the Trojans were Hittite people. Also, the first religious studies scholars. Hittites were known to collect
everybody's
ritual
gods.
texts. Yeah, everybody's gods, everybody's religious texts. In fact, we discovered whole new languages. A whole new Indo-European language was just discovered last year because the Hittites collected all these ritual texts. So yeah, they're fascinating people. And also they just were happy to mix and match their religion, because you look at some of their literature, they're Indo-European people. So you'd expect to have them to have an Indo-European pantheon, which we know a good bit about, but they pretty quickly adopted some kind of Anatolian pantheon and mixed it with Indo-Europeans. They're there's a great book that I have literally in front of me.
Nice. Yeah, because there's that green stone as well that they have in Hattusa. Yeah. What's that called?
Yeah, this is called Hittite Myths. This is the standard collection of all of the Hittite myths. I'm going to make a video about it because I just find the Hittites to be a fascinating people. They're also one
as do I.
Their language is also really difficult to learn. But
cool. Yeah, I looked up, I tried to do mundane astrology for the different plagues and the different wars that they went through. Also the Treaty of Kadesh, right?
Hattusili III and Ramses II.
Yeah, that was the first treaty ever done. And so I find that so fascinating. But I tried to do mundane astrology to see if the eclipse timing and the full moons and all that kind of stuff could help understand. And from a perspective of looking in, I found it very interesting because you can kind of see the timing of when the plagues happened and all that kind of stuff. But cool. I'm going to get that book. Thank you.
Yeah.
What's really cool too, just you guys mentioning those things, is that there are these asteroid belts in our solar system, and so there's the main asteroid belt, which is right past Venus's orbit, and then Jupiter has this orbit, and it has two asteroid belts kind of in orbit with Jupiter. It's not a full belt, it's just these two kind of I don't know what you would call them, oblong kind of belts, and they're called the Trojan asteroid belts, which is kind of perfect, right? That Jupiter would be orbiting with these Trojan asteroid belts.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating thing. It's also fascinating to think that the Trojans were Hittites. I just always we know who they were, and we have a sense of what. And also we have
Yeah.
a sense of why the war happened. It wasn't that the Greeks
Mhm.
were invading because of getting Helen back. It was because of the Bronze Age collapse. They were refugees. Like they invaded everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
They invaded
Mhm.
Egypt. It wasn't they invaded, they were refugees. And their
Mhm.
homelands were trashed. And so they
Mhm.
left, and they were successful. So-called sea peoples, one of which became the
Yep.
Philistines.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very interesting to read the Iliad with this awareness. Like I just reread it, or I'm like just started to read it again, that the Trojans were actually the Hittites. So I
Yeah.
love it.
What
So
translation are
great.
you reading?
I don't know, whichever my boyfriend had. It's just probably some academic one. Which one do
Yeah,
you
there's.
suggest?
I mean, the classic one is the Lattimore, but then this
Mhm.
new Odyssey movie is coming out, and recently
Yeah.
a woman has translated both the Iliad and the Odyssey for the first time, and I'm curious to read her translations because it's such a blood-soaked book, especially the
Mhm.
Iliad and the end of the Odyssey is just absolutely massacres. So it's interesting to see, that a woman's translated it for the first time. I'd also really
Yeah.
recommend, if you really love beautiful poetry, one of the most slept on translations of the Iliad is Hobbes's translation. We think of Hobbes as a political
Mm.
philosopher, but Hobbes is an excellent translator of Greek. He translated Thucydides, and he also translated some of Homer, and his translations are really, really good. They have that kind of King
That might
Jamesy kind of feel to it.
that might be the one I'm reading because it is very poetic and I do really enjoy it. Just off.
I mean, the Lattimore is
Yeah.
probably. I mean, it's also very poetic. Lattimore is the classic
Mm.
standard one that everyone
Okay.
should read.
Cool. What was the woman's name?
What is her name?
I'll look it up.
Justin, I did have a question for you with a little bit with the Christianity and magic. I want
Sure.
to try to touch on that before we wrap it up because we're already an hour and a half in.
Yeah.
In the past, and I would even say in the future, with their own way, especially say with like satanic panic, but like even in the past, Christianity has always been known for like condemning magic. But then, like,
Out of one
even
side of his mouth.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And even from my own experiences, getting into this, ceremonial magic, getting into that personally, and reading like grimoires and just all the books, I even was just like, well, there's a lot of Christian and Catholicism, like in this stuff, or imagery, or just stuff that ties back to like Catholicism, and it's just like, all right, so like at what they condemn it, but like yet they have their own, they have their own oils. They have, again, you even mentioned the Eucharist. They have exorcisms. They have holy water, blessings, saint. You can, with the saints and petitions. They have all that stuff. So, like, what is it that they're actually condemning when it comes to magic, in your opinion?
I think that there's two things. The first thing is that magic is just always an othering term. It was invented as an othering term, right? The Greeks invented it to describe what the Persians did, right? We do religion. They do magoi. They're magoi. They're magia. Magic was invented as a term to describe what Persians did, and of course, the Greeks had a very low opinion of the Persians. So the term was invented as a way of othering people. So at the heart of it, right, when you talk about sorcery and magic or whatever, you're not talking about what is what what people do or don't do. What you're talking about is what is legitimate, what is illegitimate. And what I do with religion and what you do with superstition. It's that kind of thing, right? It's who's on the inside and who's on the outside. And so that's the first, right? Is that the church wants to have a monopoly on what we might call supernatural causation. They want to have a monopoly on supernatural causation. And so what they do is they say basically anything outside of that is magic, sorcery, maleficia, whatever legal technical term you want to use. But there's also a theological worry. And the theological worry I get a little bit more is that part of what the church and basically any religious institution wants is to preserve the sovereignty of God. Because if God isn't sovereign, then at some level you're not legitimate, because there could be because if God's tapped you to be the legitimate representation of God in the world, and if God's not sovereign, then you can kind of muck with that. There's a wiggle room, and most institutions of power don't want a lot of wiggle room. They're not interested in that because they want to hold on to that power. And there's a worry that if it's the case that you can force the hand of God or force the hand of angels to do stuff, then you have a kind of power that breaks the system, right? You have a power that like breaks the power of the priesthood, that breaks the power of you shouldn't be able to do that. Right? There's something squirrely going on with that. And so I think that there are two worries. There's a political worry, which is always wrapped up in who's on the inside and who's on the outside and who has legitimate power and who doesn't, right? That's just the politics of power. There's also this theological worry that believing that you can compel God to do stuff or believing you can compel angels to do stuff is a violation of the theology. God is sovereign. The angels work directly for God. You can't make angels do stuff because they don't answer to you. You know, who are you? Some schmuck. Why is Michael going to stop whatever Michael's doing? Because, you know, God got him doing whatever God needs him to do. He's going to pick the phone up for you. You're just some guy, right? Like this is hubris. And so that actually, I think that theological worry makes some sense to me, right? To think that you can pick the phone up and to call Gabriel, and Gabriel's like, no, dude, I'm announcing over here to like this woman, like to blah blah blah, and you're like I got the digits for Gabriel. I can retweet Gabriel. So I think that's the worry. It's that it's like the ability to force theology, but the church makes concessions to this, right? The church makes concessions, and the most popular concession to this is intercession. Intercession is the church's answer to magic. Don't go to the local necromancer and try to summon an angel or demon to get them to do stuff for you. Don't do that. Why? Because you have access to intercession. So one level of intercession is saint intercession, right? You can ask an angel who's really good at a certain thing, right? Finding lost stuff or whatever. And you pray to that saint. And because that saint basically retweets you to God. And because that saint has such divine favor, you get a direct line to the big guy. And if that fails, then you have the ultimate nuclear weapon, which is a Jewish mother. There's no force more powerful in the universe than a Jewish mother. And it just so happens that the one time the apostles, and there's no bigger saints than those cats, they needed Jesus to do something. At the wedding of Cana, Jesus did not want to turn the water into wine. They asked, and he didn't do it. So what do? They deployed the ultimate weapon, his mom. Right? And they told, hey, Mary, get him to do it. And guess what? His mom said, Jesus, do the thing. Good Jewish boy. I'm not going to tell his mom no. So guess what you can do in Catholicism? If the saints won't answer, if God won't answer, you go to the nuclear option. You go ask Mary to ask Jesus, because Jesus can't say no to Mary. If that's not like high level, like chess magic, playing one entity against another to get for you to pass your SATs or whatever. But that's clearly right. That was clearly a folk practice that the church, I'm sure, was at some point very uncomfortable with. But it was probably so popular they couldn't get rid of it, and so that functions right as a kind of magic. And again, if I could summon an angel or demon to get something, like maybe that'll work. But I know what will definitely work is Jesus' mama. Like that will work. He's like, hey, Izima, you need to go do this, and she's like, okay. So this is a place where you can't conjure a demon to get you to find buried treasure, but you can call Mary to make Jesus force you to. Look, guys, like you can call this whatever you want to call it. You can, if you don't want to call it magic, fine, but it'll do until the magic shows up.
Hey, that's a really good point. That's pretty funny.
And I talk to Catholics about this, Marian saint intercession and Marian installation. Like, yeah, but we're not worshiping her. I'm like, okay, like it, again, like you want to split a hair, like we can split hairs. But if there were a big statue of me and people were lighting candles in front of me and begging me for stuff, I'm like, yeah, it's not worship. You call it whatever you want to call it. Like you want to split the hair and not call it magic, not call it like divine compulsion. You can do whatever you want, but and again, this is where the Protestant Martin Luther really disliked this stuff, or at least some of it. and this did lead to Protestantism. But yeah, I think at the heart of again, at the heart of so much of Western ceremonial magic, especially conjurations of angels and demons, is the good stuff. It's like compelling these metaphysical entities to get you stuff. And the church's answer to that is, yeah, we already got that. Like, pray to Saint Michael or whatever. Or,
In paganism, you have all the spirits that are out there. Some of them have certain alignments to different gods, and you have the spirits that are with you. Things like your Haminga and such. Guardian spirits and whatnot, and which then gets translated to like guardian angels and things like that, or like your own personal fate, your own personal Norn has been suggested as well, right? And so the pagan relationship, it's actually very much the same. We're like, the big guy doesn't have time, and none of the pagan gods are whatever. Well, except for Heimdall. Technically, he's sees and watches and hears everything but that's kind of what he is as a being. So he's also like God. He hears all your prayers, and he's got time for none of them because you're screwing with the space-time continuum, right? And it's not his position. He's just on lookout and protecting things existentially. But the long story short is that I think that's where the Christians get this big problem, is that they've gone and they've stripped down the entire spirit world and then tried to force fit it into angels and demons and different characteristics of the Trinity of God, and it's caused an unnecessary theological debate about things, when it ought to be understood that there are many things in the order of the invisible spirit world, and some of them are friends, some of them are foes, and some of them are custodians of places above and below.
I mean, it's funny that if you look at the early engagement with the Christians and the Northern European pagans, it wasn't the gods they worried about. I mean, they were happy to have been there. There are still stave churches that have images of Thorn and Odin and Jesus fighting at Ragnarok. Like they're okay with that at some level. The thing that seems to have worried the early Christians is the concept of fate. In the old English poem, The Wanderer, right? Weird bithful rat. Fate is inescapable. It was the concept of fate they hated. This is true of astrology as well, because Christianity relies on the idea that you can choose for your own free will to accept the grace of God and therefore relieve yourself of sin. And the concept of fate, early on, this was what the Christians worried about. The idea that look, you want to still worship Odin and go to Valhalla and whatever, sure, fine, right? It's heaven, like whatever. But it was fate that really, really troubled them. And this concept of weird, which is where we get the modern word weird from, right? Weird is the old English word for fate. They hated this concept because it mucked around with their theology. So it's interesting that, again, the Christians, early Christians at least, one of the things I will laud them for is they were able to pick their battles in a way that it is shocking that they would be like, yeah, sure, like Jesus and Serapis are the same thing. Yeah, that's okay for now. It really shows you they're playing the long game in terms of the syncretistic game. They were like, we'll play this at first. And again, like I said, you can go to stave churches still in Norway and Sweden and still see images of like a clear Jesus, right? He has like holes in his hands and crown of thorns, and he's like right there with Thor with his hammer fighting Fenrir or whatever.
But by the Viking Age, there were Christians and pagans that were kind of on the same page about some of the Viking activity. Took me a long time to realize that too.
Yeah, this is the thing that it's funny. I have a friend of mine who's a ex-Catholic, now pagan, and she said I had to get away from Catholicism in order to become pagan. And me and my other Jewish friend, who's also comes from the Orthodox world, we're like, you had to leave Catholicism to get away from paganism? As far as we can tell, you're on the same team. Like, have you been in a church? Like, and I'm it's funny because, again, for coming from, like a very aniconic tradition, like my tradition, where we're like, we don't depict anything. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Did you just go like take a couple steps back and look at the church you're in? Like, good. So good. Again, like this kind of concepts are really they can be humorous in a way. That one person's paganism is another person's. And of course, you go ask a Catholic, they're like, "No, God, no. We broke with the pagans. We were the great. We conquered the pagans." And the Jews are sitting back there going like, like, did you beat him by becoming that? What happened there? Like, so it's sort of a funny, again, I go into a Celtic church in Ireland and I see all the knot work and all of the other stuff and the Ogham script. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, the success of Christianity was at least in many ways its ability to compromise and compromise the things that the Christians would never say they would compromise on. And they did.
I think almost everything that Christians think is Christian morals is just pagan morals that were being, that were put way out of context under the assumption that, like in modern day with Christians, you do things like somebody kills somebody, you might want to execute them for killing somebody, right? That would be if you're going to bother to do that, and you're an entirely spiritual, especially animist culture. You're going to do this under some ordinance. It's going to be spiritual. A life is being taken, a life that's a threat to society, but yet it's still a life, and your gods have some say in that manner. So there's something to that, but you didn't just sacrifice them willy-nilly. Even in the Northman movie, the guy had to be like, "Oh my God, I'm cursed. I better sacrifice." So something had to happen. He didn't just do it because he felt like it, right?
The Christians, the Christians adopted Stoic morality.
Right.
Almost full tilt. Early Christians we know were pacifists. They didn't engage in warfare. They refused to join the Roman army. They didn't believe in the death penalty. They're pacifists, and so until they got state power, and then they weren't so much interested in that anymore. You become an empire. Pacifism isn't a good look when you have an empire.
Fate really is where like all of these things intersect, because it's that place where some people can rationalize necessity and some people can't, right? So Stoics, for example, they're quite comfortable with necessity, but other groups of people aren't. And it's also the place where like meaning is either linear or cyclical, right? And so that's a big difference between thought too, where apocalyptic thought would make meaning more linear, like this happens, suffering exists, so at some point that has to resolve, right, into like an apocalyptic ending event. Whereas like Stoics or people who can handle the idea of necessity, they would think of meaning as like cyclical or adaptive or whatever, and it's just kind of different. There's a lot more acceptance to it, perhaps.
But the Stoics, of course, were both cyclical and apocalyptic, right? They believed in the epikurosis, the cyclical process by which the entire universe was destroyed by fire and then reconstituted over and over and over again. So, but no, they thought that the Stoics thought that fate was simply the fact that God was good. That if God is good, there must be fate, because otherwise, it's just random shit happening. And they're like, no good God would allow that. No, God has a plan. Everything is planned out for the best, and fate is proof of God's goodness. And our task is to learn to accept it, because in the same way that when I tell my kids, like, screen time is over because watching screens all day is bad for you, they throw a big fit because they don't want to not watch whatever Bluey or whatever. Turns out, watching screens all the time is bad for you, and you throw a big fit when you don't like it, but it is bad for you. Well, turns out that for the Stoics, God has ordered the world in a way that is good for us, and we throw a big fit because we lose Bluey.
Right? Yeah, providence and pronoia.
Yeah, exactly.
I did want to ask, just based off of your metaphysical view, on like first glance or first thought about that, I would think that would be like quite opposite to Gnosticism, but I don't know much about it, you know, and I just wondered if you could speak on that because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think the Gnostics and the Christians are very opposed to this concept of fate. They really, Hermione is they don't like this concept. It's not until Calvin that this becomes the thing that Christianity deals with. But no, like it's very important that since John Philoponus, that creation comes out of nothing, that free will is given, and that contingency rules reality. And this makes Christians a very nervous people. I mean, anxiety is like, I mean, there's you look at the ancient Greek world and there's no evidence of people being anxious or something. It seems a very particularly Christian kind of problem, because the world's contingent. The world could always be otherwise than it is. And the Gnostics were certainly that way, and the Christians were that way. But if the world's just the way that it is, then why be anxious about it? It seems like, and again, even with astrology in the ancient world, you look at the defenses of astrology, the psychological defenses of astrology, even by the Stoics. The Stoics were big advocates of belief in astrology. Panaetius, Posidonius, they were all big into astrology. And part of their defense of astrology was, if you can see what's coming, then you can steel yourself for what's about to happen. Now, if you know your city's going to be invaded because there's a whatever, Saturn's in this and Aries is in this, and oh god, the plague is coming, Jupiter such and such conversions happening, something big is going to happen. Like, you can be like, okay, I know what's coming. Same way that you can, like, the weather tomorrow is going to be raining, you can make sure to bring your umbrella so you don't get rained on. The Stoics were like, astrology is like that. We can predict what's about to happen, at least vaguely, and we can like make sure that we are okay when it happens. So it was about managing fate, right? Fate is still coming, but it was about managing it in a way that the Christians were like, no, nothing is fated. Like, you can pray today and God will change the weather. Like, God is sovereign. Nothing is written down. Everything is being developed. And of course, even the radical version of that is in Islam, and Islam adopts an even more radical version of this called occasionalism, where every single moment of creation is being generated spontaneously by God. Like in the way that a film, right? Every single frame of a film, you move the film fast enough, it all looks like it looks like time is continuous. But in Islam, they take that even further with occasionalism and say, no, every single moment is because of the mercy of Allah. Like, just a past moment ago, God could have hit pause and it'd have been billions of years of pause we've never known. And this is the radical sovereignty that's adopted theologically by Christianity and Islam, and is bequeathed to them in some ways by Judaism. But no, for the pagans, the dealing with fate, that was the thing. Managing fate.
I think like the personal responsibility as well, like being a Buddhist, there's there's the idea that you have this life, but it's your karmic relationship to things. And when you make a choice right now, it does change your relationship to your future karmic situation, so there's the idea that you can change your karma. But from an astrologer, it's like, yeah, you have your fate, but you can change the octave at which you see things, right? So it's like, yes, you have the situation that is happening, but if you do enough prayer or enough devotional practice, this is what I believe, is that you can actually have a different response to that thing versus it being so harshly negative. So I think it's interesting, the more personal responsibility and sovereignty that a person has for their own existence, I think the better off people are. And I think sometimes religions with too many rules tend to create this atmosphere that's like, just follow the rules, you'll be fine. Because as an astrologer, I didn't even know that actually Christians didn't like astrology, because I grew up Catholic and I didn't really know that was a thing. But I've had such crazy responses being an astrologer from Christians, and they act like I'm like the devil. And I'm like, what is this? Why is this happening? Like, clearly I'm a light being, I'm not a dark person. Like, I don't have a dark energy in my being, and so it's like, I just feel, there's something interesting there in the Christian religion as far as like how they view people who try to just understand fate or understand their path.
Right.
Well,
in Christianity, the the Christianity, the way that they squared the circle is that the stars are signs of the will of God, but they're not determinations of the will of God. So that is to say, God is showing you what could happen, not what's going to happen. And so this is why elective astrology is forbidden by Christianity. So the idea is that you can't tell someone what's going to happen because you don't know. But you can say, like, you know, in the same way that you can look down that way and say there's an army coming, right? Like you can look at the stars and say this is what's coming, but the army could go the other way. And again, people forget that astrology is only now esoteric. It was taught in medieval universities. You had to take, if you were a doctor, you had to take classes in astrology. This was not esoteric at all. Like, it was just like, if you wanted to become a physician, you had to be able to do the elective astrology to determine when it was optimal to do bloodletting. So this wasn't even it wasn't esoteric at all. I mean, it was like mandated by the university system.
It was part of the curriculum.
The Norse have a concept called orlog in the Old Norse tongue, which basically translates to original law. And it's kind of like the idea of, like, it is basically it's like your specific incarnation mission in the part of the animist Norse tradition that understands reincarnation, and you kind of go through, and it's like Dharma, right? And as somebody who does divination and also can do some astrology myself, it was just like, I'm also an Aries, so don't tell me I don't have free will, but also I can't deny what the divination and the astrology are showing me. And I'm realizing that there's a dance between two. You can take personal agency, or you can surrender to something, right? God gave us free will, including, free will to make all sorts of mistakes. And, the Bible has wonderful lessons of first man and second man with mistakes, making big mistakes, right? And so what was fated? Because God, in conversation, literally didn't know that Eve was going to bite the apple and then give it to Adam. He had to find out, because he didn't know where. You don't know where. I thought you were the all-seeing God. It's just like the principles by which they say God is this all thing is not his character in Genesis, right? He doesn't know. He has to he's practically physically showing up, right? It's more like a flesh and blood Anunnaki kind of feeling by that merit, right? The point is that you got free will, but then your free will means nothing if you aren't with reality, because you don't understand causality. And thus, your poor choices will destroy you. You'll never have the life you really want, because you will deny your orlog and all the freedom following your orlog provides. I use the I Ching in my divination. Every moment of every life, you have the potential of 64 different kinds of choices that are going to emanate out of the causality of one to another. Oh, there is so much freedom, but there is also fated things, because we all have an unconscious, and, Odin couldn't prevent his own death. Who am I to be better than Odin?
Yeah, or we'll have them all, right? Friends die and cattle die, but I know what doesn't die: the doom on a dead man.
Have them all. That's my man. All right.
Unfortunately, we're almost at 2 hours here, and we do have to. This conversation will have to end at some point. So, this is a great conversation, Justin. I really thought it was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. I mean, again, it's always like great to be able to chat with folks, coming from a range of traditions, and just like, again, if I, giving what little I can contribute, and hopefully it's something intelligent and something worthwhile. And I'm glad to be able to have a conversation. So it's been an honor. Thank you.
No, of course. Thank you. If you want, do you want to plug, your YouTube or anything else you want to promote? I know you might have some speaking things coming up. Maybe you want to promote that.
Do I even have anything speaking things? I hope I don't. The older I get, the more I realize I don't want to travel. There's this sort of weird travel fetish where like it's like everyone's supposed to love to travel and be in Paris and do this, and I'm like, I don't like this. I don't want to be in a plane. I don't want to be in an airport. I don't want to like be jet lag. I don't want to. Yeah. So no, I don't think I have anything specific coming up. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. No, if folks want to like follow my work, I'm over at ESOTERICA on YouTube. If you want to get some cool old books, you can check out my bookstore. But I'm teaching this class on Middle Platonism, which I think is a part of philosophy that doesn't get a lot of coverage, and so I'm putting those out, and so part of my maybe irrational, maybe idealistic, maybe naive dedication to open access, university level educational material, and so I'm doing this whole course on Middle Platonism, which will eventually come to touch on topics like fate and astrology, and Christopher Brennan's back there somewhere smiling. So so working on that, but otherwise it's just I'm just at ESOTERICA. It's kind of that's my gig.
Awesome. Thank you again so much. I really appreciate having you on. It was an amazing chat. It's wild to actually see you on the show, considering
I appreciate it.
how I've known your show and everything and watched it and learned from it. It's pretty wild. And thank you everybody also on the show for joining me. I'm not going to go and spend the time and go through the whole thing, but I appreciate you all making it, and everybody in the chat. That's what's up as well. I appreciate everybody making it, and everybody putting in, I guess, their 2 cents in their comments. Thank you all for that. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.